Let's talk to retired submarine captain Ryan Ramsey. Ryan, a very good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, thanks for having me on.
Very, very unusual, this story, isn't it? I mean, the Titanic seems to attract an awful lot of, curiosity seekers, I suppose, if you want. James Cameron, the director of the movie, sent a submarine down, I think, an unmanned one, some years ago, and there was another project, I think, on the go around about the same time. Looking at this vessel on the surface of the water before it went in, it doesn't look particularly... incredibly strong and incredibly sort of robust, does it? Is that my unseaworthiness coming through, or what can you tell us about it?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think there'll be a lot of questions as to the actual capability and whether it was capable of achieving that particular descent. So it's an independently made vessel, carbon fibre, I believe, by design.
Right.
It's a hugely risky activity to travel down that deep.
I mean, the pressure alone, once you get down to those kinds of depths in the sea, would suggest that you need something which is very strong on the outside.
Yes, I agree totally. So you're talking about 400 bar of pressure at 3,000 metres, which is absolutely considerable. And I can see that it's obviously done operations in the past, but we don't know how deep it's gone or how many it's done of those. But hopefully they'll have managed that risk as they planned this mission.
Right. And it seems to have gone missing for no apparent reason. There's no indication of why it's no longer trackable. But I was hearing this morning another report suggesting it doesn't have a distress signal. Is that even legal?
So there's the question about legality out in the middle of the ocean is a very lengthy topic to go into. but you're absolutely right. Whether it has SOLAS, which is safety of life at sea, met the standards required of that, I don't know. The communications, if you piece it all together as best we can, it's gone down. It's probably suffered some form of defect or problem to deal with, and they can't recover from that. And like you say, there's no emergency buoy to release in order to let people know that they're actually in trouble.
Right. And I mean, as far as the actual physics of it coming back up to the surface, I'm told that they could sort of fire their tanks, as it were, to float back up. But does that depend on whether they've got power?
It does indeed. So everything revolves around having power, unless they've got some form of mechanical release for those particular things. But I think it's a bit more, it's a bit more complex than that. So just the tanks alone won't be enough to enable it to surface.
Right. And I mean, the Titanic, as I say, has been a sort of curiosity, hasn't it, for ever since the event itself, ever since it set sail on that fateful day back in 1912. I mean, what is it about the Titanic, do you think, that sort of fascinates people so much?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think it's romantic. It's a very, very well-known story of tragedy, and people do become fascinated with it. The fact that adventurers try all kinds of things, so the ones that go to space with Elon Musk or with Jeff Bezos, they're exploring the boundaries of what humans do, and I think this is another example of that, which in this case has tragically gone wrong.
Yeah, I mean, although it's a slightly more kind of, I suppose, self-indulgent one, this, isn't it? Because this is a bit of kind of very expensive tourism, that if you can afford £250,000 to go into a very small box to go down and have a look at the Titanic, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, you'd have to have an awful lot of money to want to spend that kind of money on doing something like that, but I'm not sure what they would have seen if they would have managed to make it down to the ocean floor.
Well, I think that it's fitted with searchlights, so they would have seen some of it, but you'd never be able to conceptualise the whole Titanic. You'd just see pieces of it. I mean, you'd need huge amounts of light in order to be able to show the whole thing. So, yes.
And so is the community, the submarine community, if there is such a thing, generally looking upon this as a bit of a fool's errand, as tragic as it may be, that it's not something you would want a lot of people to be encouraged to do?
Yeah, so I think there's two ways of looking at this. So the submarine community around the world, whenever there's a rescue for submariners and submarines, they pull together and use rescue systems that are universal across the world. However, in this particular case, like you say, it's consumer or tourism. And it's a submersible, and the submarine service can't really help in those particular areas. There's not a lot we can do to support them in this particular case.
No, quite.
And rather than describing it as a fool's errand, I think a mission that's gone wrong, tourism that's gone wrong, and my thoughts are with the families.
Of course. But, I mean, one of the things I find fascinating, and I remember speaking to people who had been... There's been a couple of missions like this down into the Mariana Trench where there's so much about the sea that we don't know, you know, in a way that the space exploration programs have actually discovered probably more about what's around the planet than what's actually under the surface of the sea, in it.
That's absolutely correct. So that I wrote about this a while back, that the sea is less explored than space.
Yeah.
And yet it holds vast amounts of potential for the human race, and yet we don't invest enough time researching it and making sure that we make the most of it. And the sea can be a really horrendous place to operate. You have to really, really respect the sea as a mariner. It controls you. You don't control it. You just get to operate in its environment.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely terrifying. I mean, I remember my parents once came to see me when I lived in New York. They came to see me on the QE2, and they had a storm on the way, and they said, "I've never been more frightened in our lives." You know, sort of 50-foot waves, this huge ship just going up and down like this, crashing down. And I've done a bit of sailing in my time, just relatively sort of, you know, recreational sailing. But you know, the sea can just turn. Like on a sixpence, it suddenly goes from, you know, sunbathing on the deck to sort of holding on for dear life because a squall's come over and a tiny little cloud has caused you to almost hit the rocks. It's terrifying.
It really is, and operating under the sea, as I've done for a great proportion of my life, is the same there. That things change instantaneously. The characteristics of the ocean that you're travelling through or operating within can change really, really quickly. And so full respect has to be had for the sea, and you have to operate in it safely.
Yeah, so could there have been something undersea, like an undersea current that changed, that could have had an influence on what happened here?
Potentially, but I think at that depth you don't see too much current activity. I suspect that it's been a mechanical or electrical failure of some kind that has led to complete loss of electrics, or a potential break in the pressure hull itself, which would have resulted in implosion. So,
right. And I mean, as much as it doesn't sound as though there's much that we can look forward to here, is there any kind of hopeful sign that you would look for to see that they're still actually, you know, alive?
So I think the only thing would be some form of communications, and we haven't had that. And the reality is, everybody's talking about the oxygen's reducing, or they've only got 48 hours left. The reality is that carbon dioxide is the thing that ends this totally, because they can't get rid of the carbon dioxide as quickly as they might need to, and that takes human life. And
if they have managed to reach the surface, but nobody can find them on the surface, what could they do then? I mean, would they be at least safe if they were on the surface?
They definitely would be safer. So if they're on the surface and the weather conditions permit, they can open the hatch even for a short amount of time, which changes the air within the within the submersible itself, and that enables survival for a bit longer. But then you're still into the potential of, you know, you're trying to spot a needle in a haystack to try and find this thing. Yeah. If they're on the surface, they will be found eventually. But in my heart of hearts, I don't think that's the case. Yeah, well, we'll keep our fingers crossed as best we can do. Ryan, appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed. Ryan Ramsey, retired submarine captain.